It started with a bargain bin purchase. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a way to pass time during a lazy weekend. That's when I found it. Eidolon, an old, obscure survival horror game for the PC. The case was scratched and worn, its once vivid cover now faded to muted tones. The back described it as an immersive journey through your worst fears. The store clerk shrugged when I asked about it. Never heard of it, he said. Probably some shovelware from the early 2000s. $5 if you want it. I bought it. At home, I popped the disc into my PC, expecting janky graphics and clunky controls. Instead, the game booted with an eerie, minimalist title screen. A shadowy forest under a blood-red moon, with Eidolon scrawled in jagged, flickering letters. No music. Just the sound of rustling leaves and distant whispers. I hit start. The game's premise was simple. You played as a nameless character who woke up in a dark, desolate forest with no memory. Your goal was to escape while avoiding the Eidolon, an ominous entity that stalked you through the woods. The graphics were primitive even for the time, but there was something unsettling about the way the shadows moved. They didn't follow the usual logic of light and perspective. Sometimes they seemed to reach for me, curling like fingers. The first few minutes were standard fare. Gather supplies, find clues, avoid danger. The controls were stiff, and the gameplay was unforgiving. One wrong move, and you'd hear the creatures growl before everything went black. But then things got strange. It started small. The game seemed to react to me in ways I didn't expect. When I paused to look at my map, the screen would flicker and faint text would appear for a split second. I managed to catch one phrase, "You're being watched." At first, I thought it was part of the game's atmosphere. But the longer I played, the more personal it felt. The whispers in the background seemed to grow louder whenever I hesitated or backtracked, as if mocking my indecision. And then there were the notes. Scattered throughout the game were scraps of paper with cryptic messages, clues I assumed to the overarching mystery. But one note made me freeze. Why did you leave her behind? It was unsettling because it wasn't part of the game's plot. It was my story. Years ago, I'd broken up with someone I cared about deeply, too afraid to commit. How could the game possibly know that? I brushed it off as coincidence. But the next note shattered that illusion. Remember the lake? The promise you broke? My stomach twisted. The lake. Our lake. I promised to meet her there one last time after the breakup to talk things through, but I never showed. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling on the keyboard. Was this some elaborate prank? Had someone hacked my computer? I hit escape, intending to quit, but the game wouldn't let me. Instead, a message popped up. You can't run. Against my better judgment, I kept playing. The game world grew more distorted. The shadows thickened, writhing like living things. The whispers morphed into voices speaking my name. My real name. When I reached a clearing in the forest, the screen froze. The camera zoomed in on a tree, where someone had carved a date into the bark. The day I left her waiting at the lake. I felt sick. Suddenly the Eidolon appeared, a hulking, faceless figure shrouded in darkness. It moved toward me, unnervingly slow. My character couldn't run. The controls were unresponsive. As the creature closed in, the screen filled with static. When it cleared, I was no longer in the forest. I was at the lake. The graphics had changed, becoming disturbingly realistic. The water shimmered under a pale moon, and the surrounding trees swayed in a gentle breeze. I could even hear the soft lapping of waves. On the dock stood a figure. She was facing the water, her back to me. Her hair was exactly as I remembered, long and dark, cascading down her shoulders. I tried to move my character, but the game didn't respond. Instead, the camera panned closer as if someone else were controlling it. When I reached the dock, she turned. Her face was wrong. Hollow eyes, a slack jaw, her skin pale and cracked like porcelain. But her voice was the same. You left me, she said. I slammed my hands on the keyboard, trying to exit the game, but it was useless. You promised, she whispered. The screen flickered again, and suddenly I was underwater. My character thrashed as the Eidolon dragged me deeper into the murky depths. The screen filled with darkness, accompanied by a guttural growl. Then two words appeared. Game over. I ripped the disc from my PC and tossed it into the trash. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw her face, heard her voice. My phone buzzed around 3 a.m. When I checked, I found a text from an unknown number. "You can't run." I stared at the message, heart pounding, before deleting it. The next day I went back to the store where I'd bought the game, hoping to find some answers. But the clerk looked at me like I was crazy. "Eidolon," he said. "We don't sell that. Never have." I insisted, even showed him my receipt, but he just shook his head. Defeated, I left the store and drove home. When I opened the door I froze. Sitting on my desk was the game disc, pristine and unblemished. And beside it, a note in her handwriting. "You promised?"